Why are we doing this? What are you talking about? I mean, standing here, Because we're trying... Yeah, we're trying to kill this reviewer guy, I know, but... we're goners. What are you talking about? We're just randomly standing out here doing pretty much nothing. And to top that off, we don't even have names. We're just called Mooks. Well, that's because it's half of my last name. What's your full name? Mook. Random Mook. Ugh. Hey, what's that music playing? It sounds like a song. Oh my god, are you okay?
Terrorist, your game is through, 'cause now you have to answer to
Those guys are dead. Well, now that I'm comfortable, let's start up this review. Now, this game has been in the woodworks for me for a review for a really long time. I got it at launch, and around that time I had a lot of stuff going on, so I decided to do Sonic 4 Episode 1 around that time. However, now that I'm tackling all the Assassin's Creed games, I can finally get back to this one. When I first played it, I had a really good time with it, but was I just nostalgia blind for a new game, or did my opinion have some merit to it? Well, the only way we're going to find out is by playing the game ourselves, so let's start. Now, before I actually get to the game, let me talk about the games that came between this and Assassin's Creed 2. In Brotherhood, they manage to get back to the villa, but upon touching the apple, Desmond stabs Lucy and goes into a coma. From there, his dad comes in and puts him into the machine. There, in Revelations, they finally meet Sub-616 from the last game, whose name was Clay, and learn of the first civilization's attempt to save their behinds. At the end of the game, Desmond wakes up and everyone tells him that he needs to go to New York. And while that's happening, they also learn that the end of the world is 12/21/12. You may be asking, reviewer, why are you recapping the story from those two games when there's already a recap in the game? Well, it's because they tell you what happened to Desmond in Assassin's Creed 1 and 2, but they don't acknowledge the other two games. But without the knowledge of the other two games, you're going to be lost and not knowing what's going on. We start off with a recap, and then we see the crew approach Desmond. Before I go on, let me say that this guy's name is William, and he is Desmond's dad. Moving on. They make their way through a cave, and find a giant impassable wall, with a voice telling him to find a key.
Here we go again.
He then faints, and wakes up in a machine. Dude, not all your problems can be solved with reliving ancestry.
Ants! 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 Ants!
Dance! Excellent!
So that was what it was like to be in medieval times. Huh. So I better write my paper. After a quick tutorial, Desmond becomes Hatham, a British man hell-bent on being polite and stuck up about things. Anyways, he enters a theater and sits down next to some guy. They discuss on how to get a guy, and Hatham climbs his way around the opera house. He kills someone, takes something from their neck, and escapes. We then cut to a meeting where they discuss that what he's found was a key that can unlock a door with unknown treasures. They decipher that it is located in America, and they send Hatham to retrieve the key for them. We then cut to Hatham on a boat. As he goes above dock, he encounters the captain and beats up two other crew members. After that, the captain pulls him away and asks for help against a possible mutiny. He agrees, and over the course of a couple days, finds clues to help him pin down who did it. The next day, Hatham tells the captain of the evidence, but suddenly, they are attacked by another ship. Hatham is told to go below deck, where he learns that it wasn't a mutiny, but rather somebody trying to get at Hatham. After Hatham kills him, he threatens the captain and takes his ship into the storm. They manage to get through, and after 2 months at sea, they finally reach America and cue title screen. Once they dock, Hatham meets Charles Lee, one of the associates located in America, and they go into the inn. By the way, you meet Benjamin Franklin. Over the course of a couple missions, they seek out some other people that are willing to help them. After that, they learn that the key belongs to one of the Native Americans, and she is a captive of a local slaver. They steal a convoy and let one of the Native American women get away. Then cut to winter 1775, as they manage to track down the women from earlier. They head into the woods, and Hatham manages to catch her. She introduces herself as Zio, and Hatham hands her the key. She says that she knows where it came from, but will only show him once he has stopped another slaver. Hatham, along with his badass crew, manage to kill the slaver, and she brings him to a cave. He realizes that he cannot get it open. Zio tells him a story about the people that came before, and they start to make out. A few days later, he returns back to the inn and tells the others that it was not what they were looking for. Then the plot twist is revealed.
You are a Templar.
Cut back to Des. Oh, Jesus! What happened to him? He went from looking like Adam Sandler to a malnourished Adam Sandler. Someone give him a sandwich, quick! Anyways, they figure out the key brought from England is the key they needed to open the door, and William tells him that he needs to get back into the machine. However, Desmond tells him that he is an ancestor too, and that maybe he can go in himself. Well, yeah, that's a valid reason. I mean, his father's probably better equipped for this. It can relieve some of the stress from Desmond. Heck, he can stop the hallucinations he's been having. But maybe there's a distinct reason why Desmond cannot, give it up to his father. Let's see how this plays out. His father questions him why he's going off the rail, and Desmond responds, saying that he's tired of being a pawn, and he compares his father to a Templar. His father hits him and explains that the world's at stake. That's it. That didn't address the question. What's really stopping his father from taking over at this point? Don't point out plot holes and then don't bother filling them in. Anyways, Sean tells the rest of them that this place was powered by a battery, and that their current one will not last much longer. Now, from here, you can either explore or go back into the machine. You can find cutscenes that explain a little bit about the first civilization, but they cut off from one another, and you can view them whenever you like, so yeah. Anyways, Desmond heads back in, and some things are explained that I cannot fucking read. This illustrates one of the biggest problems with some of the recaps and cutscenes, and that it's really hard to read subtitles that are white against a white or bright background, especially if they're speaking another language. This also brings up another issue I had with the game, and that it's why they're speaking another language. She could speak perfect English in the previous scenes, and now she's alone. She's speaking her native tongue, which is Mohawk, most likely for those who care. It forces you to look at the bottom of the screen at all times, which is sad if anything interesting is happening on screen, and especially irritating when important things are being said, and you can't read them because of bright backgrounds. They had other languages in previous games before, but it was very sparely used, and mostly put against a dark background. It breaks any immersion I had with the game, and makes me lost in the story. Anyways, she explains how she broke up with her Templar man because of his work and his ideas, after getting pregnant. She also explains how colonies have grown a lot larger than before. Cut to 1860, as we see... Yeah, just gonna call you Ren. Talking to his mother. He leaves to play with his friends, and after a game of hide-and-seek, Charles Lee manages to find him. He asks where the village is, and tells Ren to deliver a message.
What is your name?
Charles Lee. Why do you ask?
So I can find you.
Yeah, nice voice acting, kid.
So I can find you.
So I can find you. Ren is knocked out and wakes up to see his village on fire and finds his mom trapped. She tells him not to feel alone and dies. Skip ahead 9 years, as we learn that Ren has grown up into a cocky douchebag. After teaching his friend to hunt, they head back to the village, where some elder is waiting for them. She invites Ren in and tells him that he will receive some answers, like why they cannot leave their land, which I thought would be obvious to him, but I digress. She then gives him an apple of Eden as it engulfs the room. She, with many names, who I will now address as Mindy, tells Ren that he is in the Nexus, a place where people's paths are made. She turns him into a bird, and explains how Ren is connected to people that are really important, and must protect the sanctuary because if he doesn't, then everything's going to be ruined. He wakes up and meets with the village elder. They discuss on how he must leave, and she tells him that there is a man in the west who can train him. Cut to 1769, as he explains, in English again, what he feels about the trip. He arrives at this man's house, but unfortunately he won't let him in.
Go away. I'm not leaving.
Ren then goes into the shed, and the next day, he tries the back door, gets told off, then the balcony, and gets told off.
I will not leave. Do you hear me? I'm never leaving.
He then goes to sleep. Well, I guess knocking on 3 doors can warrant 2 days' rest. However, during the night, some people come over to try to kill the old man. However, they run into Ren, who kills them. He asks why they are there, but before he gets an answer, he is hit by another guy. But before he could explain why they were there, the old man kills him. He then tells Ren to clean up the mess and to meet him inside. Once inside, he breaks a chair, but the old man says it's not a problem. Ren tells him his name and explains why he's looking for the symbol. The old man then explains that the spirit he talked to were ones that had been harassing the assassins since Ezio did something. I'm not even going to guess what he did. After skipping an explanation, he says that if the Templars aren't stopped, the spirit's vision will become a reality. Before we continue, I just want to highlight this moment where they're talking about the house. I'll tell you why later.
Why don't you repair it?
What's the point? Besides, I don't have materials for the job.
Anyways, the old man, who finally introduces himself as Achilles, shows him the robes and agrees to teach him. He shows him a wall and explains that the Templars want to control and seek opportunity with the colonies, and in order to stop them, one must kill all the higher-ups. 6 months later, we find Ren, mentally and physically trained, meet up with Achilles, trying to get supplies to fix the house. They arrive in Boston, 1720, and make their way to the store. On the way, though, Achilles decides to finally give him a name, one that will sound reasonable but still respect his heritage and his original name, like Ren.
Connor. Yes, that will be your name.
Or you can just call him the first name that pops into your head. Also, not to be too nitpicky, but shouldn't this have been decided months ago? I mean, what the heck did that old man call him during those 6 months? Hey, Nativity, get over here. Climb faster, he who gets tired from knocking on door. Good job, wild thing. Ready for training, Bond boy? After buying the stuff, the Boston Massacre happens. I'm serious, it just happens. You chase a guy down, he fires a gun in the air, and then 6 people die. This is gonna happen a lot in this review, so get used to it. After that, the people believe it to be Connor and chase him down. Luckily though, a crime recorded by history as a turning point for most people during this time, a crime that's still remembered to this day, with its own memorial, can easily be forgotten. What? All it took was taking down 2 posters, a printing press, and some news guy in order to make people forget an event that caused 6 people to die? It's like Hitler having a poster of him kissing a baby and stroking a puppy and expecting everyone to forget. After meeting Sam Adams and clearing his name, he gets home. Achilles explains that he wants to teach him through experience. He also says this.
What of my father?
Into the wind, I'm afraid.
We have to find him.
And we will, after the house has been repaired.
Weren't you the one that said there was no point in fixing the house? I mean, it's like their views had flip-flopped, and it's just really annoying because he said that. Anywho, Achilles gives him the hidden blade, and a man screams for someone to help his friend. After saving the friend, they move in, and Connor goes to the dock and is told to get lumber to fix the ship, which he does. 6 months after that, after older Connor monologues about stuff, we see him set sail and fetch people to join his crew. He sails out and reaches the vineyard, where they ask for David and Richard C. They speak with them, almost start a bar fight, leave, practice firing cannonballs, get into a sea battle, and finally gets home. Achilles brings him the assassin's robes and tells him to put it on. Achilles welcomes him to the Brotherhood, and they cut back to real life. Sean explains that they were able to find a power source, and they spring into action. After running through and climbing through a lawsuit waiting to happen, he reaches the top and parachutes in. He breaks into the office, but luckily, they go back to the cave and talk about the sleeper agent assassin, Daniel Pross, and tell Desmond to plug the battery in. After plugging in the battery, he heads back to the machine. Connor explains how things have become uneasy between the colonies and Britain. Cut to 1773, with Connor, who has bought himself a matching hood, be given a rope dart when suddenly Con Dodo shows up and tells how a man named William Johnson is buying their land. Achilles tells him to go meet up with Sam Adams, and Connor puts a hatchet in the guy's house. After a long horse ride, he meets Sam Adams, who says he can help. After saving a random person from losing his home, Connor meets up with Sam Adams, who is at a pub. Connor watches as they discuss how they must unite Boston, and that William Johnson is smuggling tea. They send Connor out and luckily bump into one of the smugglers. Connor follows him to a dock and proceeds to destroy the tea. Later, he meets up with Sam and the Boston Tea Party happens, and after that, he returns to Achilles and tells him what he did. 6 more months later, Con Dodo runs in and explains that William Johnson is going to purchase the land, and they give chase. Connor reaches a meeting place between William and the tribe, and as things are about to get ugly, Connor kills him. Once he escapes, he explains how there was a plan to rid the colonists of their weapons and force them into Templar order, and in order to stop them, they need to kill John Pitcairn. Cut to 1775, as we see Connor staring at a wall of Templars. Connor tells Achilles that he doesn't feel proud, and Achilles tells him that he shouldn't feel comfortable about killing. Just then, a letter arrives from Paul Revere, asking for Connor's help. He arrives at the meeting and learns that he is attacking Lexington, and planning to destroy the weapons at Concord. Luckily, though, they have an army that just needs the orders. They then discuss the one if by land, two if by sea thing, and they head off. Jump to April 18th, and then the midnight ride of Paul Revere happens. After that, Connor stays in Lexington, and the Battle of Lexington and Concord happens, with Connor leading the attack. Unfortunately, Pitcairn manages to escape. Afterwards, Washington gives a speech, and during the speech, Sam Adams praises him. However,
Really? I can think of several.
Charles Lee.
Accepted this arduous employment at the
Do I know you?
well, that was pretty easy. Alright, so instead of killing the guy that hurt you as a child, destroyed your village, joined an order that wishes to control people, became one of the heads of the group of the people you need to kill in order to bring peace, he instead meets Washington. I wonder if that's gonna bite him in the ass. Anyways, after he walks away, Connor learns that Pitcairn has taken shelter in Boston, and the only way to get him is to draw him out. Luckily, a guy named Israel Putnam here can help him with that. You find a guy that leads you to Bunker Hill in Putnam. When he arrives, Charleston is being bombarded and Pitcairn is sheltered in the city. Putnam says you might be able to draw him out if the ships are stopped, so Connor stops the ships. He then follows a patriot back to Bunker Hill where Putnam is giving a speech. Then the Battle of Bunker Hill happens, with Connor killing Pitcairn. He returns to Putnam with a letter saying that they were going to kill Washington. After some minor dialogue, we find ourselves in 1776, with Connor and Achilles arguing over how much they have helped their causes. And just because I think it's a good line, here is something I think needs to be heard.
And why should I give you any credit?
Then don't. But first, return the robe and the blade and the darts and all of the years of training and knowledge I have bestowed upon you. Return these, and then your words may have some merit.
After going upstairs, he meets Benjamin Talmadge, a previous assassin. He tells them that they have a lead on who is going to try to kill Washington, and they need to go to New York. Once they get to New York, they discuss a plan to get Thomas Hickey, a man who wants to kill Washington, imprisoned by revealing his counterfeiting ring. Luckily, they find a person with counterfeit money and tail him back to their hideout where they find Thomas Hickey and chase him down. They manage to get him, but unfortunately they are both arrested for counterfeiting. Connor tries to explain, but... Wait, did he bleed before he even got hit? Oh my god, what a wuss! Connor wakes up looking like he had a good spring break, inside of a prison. After a quick chat with Hickey, Charles Lee and his father come and take Hickey out of the cell and discuss what they need to do about Connor. The next day, Connor wakes up and overhears a conversation about an inmate planning an escape. After that, he falls asleep again. Man, his sleeping habits must be weird. The next morning, the guard leads him to an open area, where he manages to find a man who was planning an escape named Manson Weaves. While playing a game of Fenorana, he talks about stuff until George Washington's assassination is brought up, whereupon Weems goes into a patriotic speech. Once he believes you, he tells Connor that Finch stole the key, and after re-pickpocketing it, he returns to his cell. After trying the key and learning it doesn't work, he returns to Weems, who tells him that it is meant to replace the key, and he needs to be thrown into the pit. After being thrown in, he steals the key. He manages to sneak his way to Hickey's cell, but learns it was a trap. Charles Lee then rants about all of Washington's faults, and how Connor is going to be executed the next day. Connor attacks him, whereupon he learns of Connor's true identity and knocks him out. The next day, he is immediately transported to the gallows, whereupon Hickey informs him that Washington is present. Connor then walks up to the gallows, where he is hung. However, the remaining assassins manage to free him, and he murders Hickey. He then learns that he was doing it for money, nothing more. Back in reality, they call him a hero, and inform him that Washington was going back to Philadelphia. Cut to the Continental Congress, with Achilles telling Connor not to tell Washington of the Templars. He then goes in and witnesses the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Now, what real purpose does this have for Connor? I mean, all he wants to do is see Washington, who's in an entirely different place. It doesn't help out his people, it doesn't help out the Founding Fathers, it serves no purpose. I mean, it doesn't add anything to the story from watching this, and it isn't real exciting to watch dudes sign a piece of paper. They only did this because it happened, and this is one big problem with the story I'm sure people have noticed by now. Assassin's Creed, both 1 and 2, at least had their stories focused on the assassin they had. Nobody really cared about the timeline of events or the historical figures they had in the game. Each assassin had their own goals that drove them to do what they did. However, Connor doesn't do anything to help his cause, save his people, or even get revenge. He's just some random guy that happened to be at all these historical events, nothing more. If you replaced him with any Joe Smo, he would have the same amount of credibility in my book. He hasn't done anything to make me like him as a character so far, and we're 3/4 into the game! But whatever, maybe he does something better from now on that makes me like him more. Anyways, after this, Desmond wakes up as they tell him to go to Brazil for a power source. He gets to Brazil, breaks into the soccer game in the most obvious way, finds the guy who stole the power source, kills him, and gets away. Once he gets back to the hideout, he puts in the battery and they talk. However, before he gets into the machine, they manage to find a third power source. Desmond's dad offers to go, and we return to Connor. Cut to winter in the homestead, 1777, with Achilles and Connor arguing about the Templar Order, and whether to tell Washington about it or not. He then goes and sees George Washington, who unfortunately doesn't know where Charles Lee is. He then tells Connor about a missing caravan and a prisoner named Benjamin Church, and Connor goes to hunt him down. He enters a church when suddenly...
Father. Connor, any last words?
Oh look, Mr. Polite Pants is dropping by.
Wait. A poor choice.
After they fight, Connor learns that Church and the British are not supported by the Templars, and they decide to work together. They manage to find one of Church's men, who doesn't know where Church actually is. Hatham shoots him, and Connor yells at him for it. After that, Hatham tells Connor to follow the rest of his men. He follows them, and sees Hatham get captured. He frees him, and we skip ahead 1 month. In New York, Connor meets up with Hatham, who has recovered from a punch to the face. They manage to find where Church is and go there. They steal a uniform and manage to get in where Church is. While unlocking the door, Hatham asks about Connor's mother and tells Connor that he did not give the order to kill. Unfortunately, they had stepped into a trap and are ambushed. Some soldiers come back to the place and try to burn it down, in which they manage to escape. They grab Connor's ship and head out to sea. After a giant sea battle, they make it onto the ship where Church is getting beat up. After stabbing him, he reveals where the supplies are and dies. After a short monologue, we cut back to 1779, with Connor apologizing to Achilles, and tells him that he wants to try to work with his father, and goes off to find him. He goes to New York and meets up with his father, who decides to help Connor track down the Loyalist leaders. They find them talking in circles, so Hatham decides to talk to them directly. They manage to capture them, and the commander explains how the British will march on New York in 2 days. Connor goes to Valley Forge and meets up with both Washington and Hatham. Connor tells Washington about the attacks, where Hatham finds a piece of paper on the table. It turns out that the natives were helping the British, and Washington was going to burn their villages down. The two argue, and Connor stops them. He tells them that his people come first, and threatens both of them if they try to stop him. He reaches his village, and learns that some of the people have gone with Charles Lee, and he goes to stop them. After neutralizing some of the guards, he confronts Con Dodo, who believes that Connor is corrupt. After stabbing him, God damn it! After Connor goes to Mammoth, the Battle of Mammoth happens, ending with Connor accusing Lee of sabotage. Connor then leaves as we're brought back to Desmond. Lucy tells Desmond that Abstergo has his father, and that they will trade for an Apple of Eden. After Desmond monologues, he heads inside, running into many problems. He reaches the top floor, and confronts the scientist. Desmond pulls out the apple, and uses its power to kill him. He then rescues his dad, and escapes, forcing everyone in his path to kill themselves. Are you sure we're the hero? 'Cause that's a pretty messed up thing to do. Anyways, after one drive home, Desmond puts in the power source, and heads back into the machine. After Connor talks about how Lee has been dismissed, and is in hiding, we see him as he's called by Achilles on his deathbed. Connor tells him what happened, and Achilles will remind him that both his father and Lee have to die. Afterwards, he finds a man, who tells Connor that he will be able to get some ships for him. They go downstairs, and Connor explains that he will infiltrate the fort underground, using a bombardment of the fort as a distraction. After Connor helps out their army with ship battles, he heads underground and makes his way to the military district. He lights the signal, but unfortunately gets hit. He makes his way to leave and finds that he is gone, and Hatham and Connor fight. After a desperate struggle between the two, Connor manages to stab Hatham. In Hatham's dying breath, He tells him that he will not say what he done was wrong, but he is proud of his son. Cut to some time, and Connor explains, as he cuts his hair, that he must not doubt himself and promises to kill Lee. Then cut to 1782, where he pretty much gives himself to Lee. He gets knocked down, and Charles Lee swears to destroy everything that Connor holds dear. Lee orders that Connor be taken away, but he manages to escape. He swims way out to sea and learns that Charles Lee is going to be doing something with an army, and that he will meet at the Green Tower Tavern. He goes to the dock and chases Lee through a burning boat. Just as he's about to get him, they both fall through a floor, letting out a simultaneous scream. Charles starts to taunt the stabbed Connor, but gets himself shot. Connor then wakes up to find that Lee had gone to the tavern, and he hobbles his way there. Inside the cavern, he shares a drink with Lee, and then murders him, taking the key. Cut 6 months later, as Connor goes back to where he first found the apple. Mindy appears and thanks him for what he has done, and tells him to hide the key where no one can find it. Connor complains, but all she says is that it was meant to be. Anyways, he then goes to Achilles' grave, and decides to bury the key there. The simulation ends, and they go grave robbing. Back at the temple, they go up to the door and unlock it.
Here we go again.
No, that doesn't happen, but wouldn't it be funny if it did? He approaches an altar and is confronted by Mindy, who thanks him. Suddenly, another girl comes up, I guess named Minerva, and tells Desmond to stop, as doing so releases Mindy. It turns out that Mindy was trying to conquer the world through trying to manipulate the machine the first civilization built. However, she was found out and exiled. Now Minerva is back to see if Desmond had succeeded. She then tells Desmond that they have wasted too much time, and it is too late. However, Mindy says that they can, and tells Minerva to show what will happen if they touch the pedestal. It then shows a vision of natural disasters and how Desmond will become a source of knowledge. However, they will use his word to take people's lives, instead of encouraging life. Back in 2012, they argue for a bit, with Desmond saying that he must do this. Then, after telling his friends to leave, he touches the pedestals and dies. Yes! He's finally dead! No more Desmond ancestors, no more whining with little action, and best of all, no more angst.
Look out for...
Wait, look out for what? The game ends with reporters saying how the disasters are ending, and how the world is saved. Along with that, we have Mindy tell Desmond that it is time to play her part. After the credits, we see Connor go and burn down the pictures, take the axe out of the pillar, see the British ships leave, and Connor learns that his people left. And that's all she wrote. For the most part, gameplay has not really changed from Assassin's Creed 2. The only things really changed were the menus, the quick select bar, and some of the controls. However, there are a couple of new weapons that they added to the gameplay. The tomahawk is essentially this game's sword, except the sword is actually in this game. Personally, I never use the sword because the tomahawk works fine, and is able to work fast and kill enemies who can block normal attacks. Up next is the rope dart. Early in the game, you're allowed to use these, and I can say that they easily break the combat if used correctly. What you're supposed to do is climb above them and either choke enemies to death or hang them. But when you use them on the ground, you can knock all the enemies down and get a free kill. It pretty much turns you into a revolutionary scorpion. Pistols have seen a great upgrade considering there are actually guns now. They're more accurate with their shots, and don't need to line up before firing. However, it does take a while to reload, so you most likely only get one shot per fight. Before I actually get to the parkour, let me explain what they've changed in the control scheme. Instead of A and right trigger to use the parkour, you just use the right trigger for the parkour. And let's say it's a bit sloppy in my opinion. Like Assassin's Creed 1, I find myself parkouring in ways I had no intention of. However, with little time, you get used to it, and it rarely gets as bad as the first game. Anyways, as the parkour stands, I find it actually not as used as it used to be. Buildings and trees can be too spread out at times, so more often than not, you're just going to be running through the area instead of over it. It is fun when it lines up to where you're going, but in most cases, it doesn't. Areas can be a little too hard to navigate with random stuff getting in the way, or things looking climbable when they're not, and vice versa. Areas can also be way too big, especially when it comes to the forest area. Traveling around gets really frustrating around wintertime, as the snow slows you down immensely. One technique that I found really useful is this thing where you can hop over really small ledges by holding A while running. The game doesn't tell you this, but it does make running around fields much more easier. The game does have fast travel, and that's what I use to get around a lot. Every entrance of the areas have one, and there are some points scattered within the city. One major fast travel point is the underground areas, which are tunnels that connect to each other under the city. While going through the underground is really boring, the entrances to these places help to cut down travel time. Once again, there are viewpoints, but they're even more useless than Assassin's Creed 1. First of all, there are actually not that many inside of big areas, and some of the forest areas can be unbelievably frustrating. Along with that, the map actually fills in places where you ran, so since you mostly just run around, you're going to fill out the map that way. The biggest thing, though, that makes them useless is that they aren't even useful to find the side quests or collectibles. Everything's already indicated on the map already, so there's no point in trying to climb up on the viewpoints. Sailing is a new mechanic in the game, and it's completely insubstantial. You can sail at half sail, full sail, no sail, and you can fire cannonballs and other things, but there aren't that many moments to use a ship. The ship controls were very stiff, and I find it slow at times. But the biggest problem is that with the camera. Since the camera is behind the sails, and your ship takes up most of the screen, I find it really hard to see where you're going. But besides the missions that are required for the story, I never even touched the side quests, mainly because I didn't find sailing interesting or fun. Speaking of side quests and stuff, there are a considerable amount of side stuff in this game. Some of it can be extremely fun, while others can be extremely boring to do. One side quest is selling things over ground and sea routes. It gets you money to use to buy things, but just like in Assassin's Creed 2, money is no issue, since chests are backed, filled with money and other goodies. However, if you want to sell stuff, you can hunt wildlife. Animals, both completely harmless and extremely dangerous, roam the forest areas. You can kill them and skin them, and the amount of money you get depends on the condition of the fur, which depends on how you killed it. For example, if you kill animals with a hidden blade or snares with bait, you get the best price. However, if you use anything else, like guns or rope darts, it causes it to be damaged, and you don't get a good price on it. It is in no way interesting to me, but I do try to kill something if it unfortunately crosses my path. Another thing is working on the homestead, which involves helping travelers like the guy in the river. They are pretty fun to do, but they don't really reward you for doing them, so there's no real point. The last of the really cool side quests would be forts. Forts come in all shapes and sizes, and can vary from incredibly awesome or flat out boring. Again, there's no real point to them, but I do recommend going out and trying to find them. There are a ton of other side quests, like Boston Brawlers or Encyclopedia Finding, but it really didn't pique my interest, so I didn't go after them. The story, for the most part, I find is too much of a mess for me. Connor never really seems to do anything to help out his people, let alone really think about what he's doing, and never changes his goddamn voice. All he does is reenact history, which can be fun, but I don't see it to fit with Connor's goals. I would say he's just like Altair, but the later half of the game where he talks to his father is vaguely interesting, as it's really the only time where Connor seems to have trouble deciding what to do. Desmond is really hard to describe in this game. He seems fed up with being the only one who has to do this, yet doesn't actually resist doing it. He seems to grow to hate his father, yet when he's captured, they play the "but he's family" card, which is completely the opposite of what Connor does in the story. He seems to get a lot of talk from everybody, including Mindy, yet doesn't seem to actually soak it in. He seems very sloppily written, like the writers wanted both to add some character to him while speeding things along with him. Everyone else suffers from one-sidedness, but they aren't focused on as much, so it's not as bad. The setting would be okay with me if it wasn't for the main character. It's very hard to see a Native American helping out the people who both enslaved and were threatening his people. Along with that, it's just unbelievable that he would also be a pretty much part of every big event from that time. But just from the setting itself, I don't know. It just doesn't have the same feel as the other games. I think it's mostly because a lot of political stuff happened during this time, some of which Connor is a part of, somehow. Instead of fighting under the shadows, getting rid of the Templars just for the sake of protecting people's freedoms, you're instead fighting in a war publicly, with few Templar killings in between, without the whole vigilante feel to it. This game, I feel, is alright at best. Its combat is fine, with the weapons itself being fun to use, and the variety of weapons is really cool. Along with that, the side quests and some of the main story I really do enjoy. However, with the main story being a mess, with things not adding up or being interesting, the lack of the use of the parkour system, and the overuse of famous historical events, makes this title just not stick with me. Well, I guess that marks the end of the Assassin's Creed games. I mean, you have your main protagonist dead. I don't know how the heck you can get a sequel from this. But, I don't know. I still don't know what this code thing is. I think I have an idea of what it is, but I don't know. It feels incomplete. Oh well. I might as well tell Florence that I'm done. So, let's go. Hey Florence, I finished those games for you. And I couldn't find any code with them. So yeah, wait, Florence, where are you? No. No. No!